Hello, everyone. I'm Jamie Flunchball, host of the People Solve Problems podcast. I'm here with Zacharia from Lehigh University. Zach is the associate professor of supply chain management at Lehigh University. Those that know me know that I talk about Lehigh occasionally as an alum. He's also the interim department chair of the Decision and Technology Analytics department, which is a very cool title, and director of the Center for Supply Chain Research at Lehigh. So lots of different titles, lots of different roles. So we'll talk about that as it applies to problem solving. So Zach, how you doing?
Oh, very nice. Thank you very much, Jamie, for inviting me on this podcast. I appreciate the opportunity.
Glad to do it. So I want to kind of talk about your roles, because your roles, not just your titles, but also within those titles are roles from, professor to research to department head, to director. You work with industry, you work inside universities. So I'm sure you have to be pretty flexible in all the different roles that relate to problem solving. So maybe you could tell me a bit just how you think about the different ways in which you engage with problem solving as it relates to your universe.
Okay, so and I think it's interesting how you put it, and I've not necessarily thought about it that way, but yeah, there's a way that I would solve a problem, versus when I'm meeting with students, when I'm meeting with industry people, and then then I play a different role. But let me start with my basic method, and I have learned this now basically because you're constantly inundated with emails and other things that get on your desk. I mean, I know I may definitely dating myself, but it used to be phone calls. It used to be phone calls and people coming into your office and things like that. But so when I really want to think, to actually be able to come up with something that is productive, I literally book an hour at the beginning of my day. I put a timer on, so I turn off. I don't have my email going or anything else like that. And literally, I will have a little note thing that if while I'm thinking and I come up with some idea, I have permission to just write that note on the side. But it's amazing. You can do a lot of work in 1 hour, just pure thinking. And I also subscribe to that philosophy that of incrementalism. You do a little bit every day, you can do a lot, in the long term, as opposed to, a lot of time spent in, well, we plan to do it. It's really nice when you put that in your calendar and you block off the time. So to me, one of the tricks that I use, and I'm religious about the timer, that if that timer goes off, I have to stop working, and there are times when you look at the timer, I can't believe, it's not yet done or whatever. But I find that, and it's a literal game that you're playing with yourself, but the first one or two times it might seem strange, but after a while, your brain knows, I need to solve this problem. I got to figure this out. So you really put all your resources into just the issue at hand. So that's my personal method of problem solving. Now, when you're talking about other instances, when I'm talking to students or when I'm talking to industry, there my goal is slightly different. My job at that point is more to try and ask questions that get them to actually tell me what they think the problem is. And I'm sure you've reached those kinds of situations where in the process of their telling, they start to create greater understanding. And, I'm just asking questions. And I think a hint or a suggestion I'd say is that try not to come up with a solution right away, because you just keep asking, even if you think the answer is obvious. It just goes back to teaching, right? It is so much better when they figure it out for themselves than anything you say, especially if they think it's their own idea. So, I do this with students. I mean, I don't necessarily do this with industry people, but, there's something about eliciting the kind of, getting them to think about it from a different perspectives. Because so many times, and when they try and explain it to me, and then you ask more questions, they themselves start to say, oh, wait a second, no, that's not what I mean. I'm talking about this, or okay, but you're not thinking about this. And then I said, well, well, tell me more. What do you mean that I'm not thinking? What am I missing? And that usually works. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that to me are the two big roles. One where I talk about individual, but the other one is, where you're really trying to get them to come up with their own answer. The third role could be where, a large group. And in this case, at that point, I am, especially when it's brainstorming, I am more preventing someone from dominating the conversation or coming to a solution right away without thinking about other stuff. And usually the people who dominate tend to be, very, very smart or very quick to solutions, and they might not necessarily have the best solution. And there have been times where I really have to rein in, and this is usually industry people, because they'll just tell you their perspective, and they're used to running the company, and other people have ideas, and so then I play a different role in there, is where I've got to say, but wait a sec, there could be other perspectives. We're missing, we don't want to come quickly to the solution. And so one of the things that I struggle with at that point, and that takes experience, and you're sure you're much, much better than I am. But the idea of not coming quickly to a solution because one person thinks that way, and you've got 20 other people who are just sort of cowed by the situation, so those are sort of my three perspectives. I know I took quite a bit to sort of explain one question.
That's great. There's nuggets out of each of them, and I'll just react to the individual work, because I think the lesson from you is a lot of people need to hear, which is really the focus time. Allow your brain to focus. A lot of people say, I don't have time to do that, but then of course you don't have time not to, because it's a much better way to actually solve the problems, which of course is the goal. So just a quick, I'll say approval of your approach of blocking off and focusing. I want to come back to the student engagement in a second, but let me just get a little more on that large group. And I thought the way you put it was really interesting, because most of the time when people talk about leading a large group through that, they focus on trying to manage or facilitate the group forward. But the way you described it, I would articulate as removing the impediments to the team moving forward. So stopping one person from dominating, getting to a conclusion too fast, and then you just let the team move forward. And that's a sort of a different vibe than most people would describe it. And is that intentional? Is that just your experience or your style? I think it's a really intriguing perspective.
I guess it's more my style. I mean, when I teach a class, and so when I'm just talking about university students or graduate students, there's always one or two students who just quickly blurt out the answer. And you know what? That's great for that one student, but I've got another 30 students who've got to learn, and they're going to just turn off. And invariably, the super smart answer is not necessarily the right answer. I mean, there are obviously times when they are correct, but when I teach, I am, unfortunately, I need to feel that everybody's engaged, and so I really try to get everyone to participate and commit. And the only way a person can, is willing to participate and commit is when they think that their insight is of value. And so I will, and I have also in meetings said that, okay, I need to hear from somebody else. And if you don't raise your hand to say something, I'm going to be coming to you regardless. Yep. So you're better off coming now. And you know what? It frees up a lot of people, because, everyone is always scared of saying something. Is it going to be the right answer? The other thing with that is that there's no such thing as a dumb answer. I mean, and I keep telling people, but people don't believe it unless they see you not, react, right? You write every answer down. You don't, and you try and, well, tell me a little bit more. What are you thinking about this? And how does that fit? So that they feel that they can bring their view out. And this is really important when you're doing case analysis and these kinds of things, right? Because everyone's looked at the case, but right, where is the answer? And if it's complicated enough, there's no one solution.
Right.
It all depends on this thing. And I think, in real life world problem solving, it's not like you have to come up with the most optimum solution, because it depends on so many other factors. You're much better off with a solution that is mostly correct. I'm not talking about life-threatening kind of stuff, but clearly you're way better off than that, than spending another month getting the most optimum perfect solution. Then the environment has changed.
Right. Right.
I'm always much more of that, and I have many times sort of had gone against people who are just so dominating, basically because I find that you can get good ideas from people who are just not necessarily the executive, and I'm so much about because and you're a lean master, so how important it is to get the people who are actually doing the work to get their feedback, and not just the supervisor or the person in charge. And so when I'm in that kind of a brainstorming situation, I need to feel that everyone is participating, and everyone needs to feel that their voice will get heard, which will then get some of those thoughts that are a little bit out of the box, because they're not, just the way that group think,
Yep.
and that's something. So that's just my method of having done this for a few years. I'm just more comfortable that way.
Yeah, that's great. So let's go back to the student engagement. You kind of talked about a lot about sort of asking a lot of questions, allowing them to own it. There's a whole section in my book on coaching, which a lot of it is by definition the other person owns it, right? And so we're there to help them. As you just said, there probably isn't a right answer, right? There's some wrong answers. I always like to say there are some wrong answers, right? But there's probably a bunch of good answers and no right answer. But you're asking questions, they own the answer. They have to see it through. Now, I do a lot of student mentoring, and I like to say, for anybody that's worried about the future of humanity, work with students. You'll get hope. Because there's a lot of really engaged, really curious, really hardworking and interesting people in that age group. But so as you're asking questions and engaging, mentoring, coaching students, I would be curious, has your approach to that changed? And has it changed because the students have changed, or has it changed because you've learned and modified your style?
So students have changed, no doubt. So I started teaching in 2001. Actually, when I was in the PhD program, I taught classes, but really, I became an assistant professor in 2001. So I was responsible for the whole teaching, and I really, my sort of theory is that we have gotten so caught up in the phone, in being customized content. Everything is just tailored for you. And so when you're in a large classroom, it's not tailored for you. It's tailored for the entire class. So I've had to change my approaches. Years ago, I had the PowerPoint slides. I mean, I still have PowerPoint slides, but now I have an activity. I have 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then I stop to try and get you to do something, so I think students have changed a lot. Again, you have to really work a little bit harder to show why it's of value to them, because they're in a world where everything is tailored, is customized in some fashion to just their likes. I mean, Netflix has taught us this, right? You end up with shows only you're going to watch because they're just so good, versus going to theaters and just going, oh my God, I can't believe I wasted time, right? So because you get such customized, tailored content, you think everything in the world is like that, but that's not necessarily true. So I think that I've had to change some of my techniques more to get them to feel that, get them engaged, and get them to think, how is this going to help them? And, we tend to be so short-term thinking. Well, is it going to let me, okay, yeah, it's going to get me an A in this class, but is that going to get me a job? Is that going to get me this? Oh, well, this isn't related to accounting, so why do I need to pay attention? So, but they don't realize that actually the world is not so clean. This is clearly accounting and this is clearly supply chain. There's a lot of overlap, and you need to be able to take skills from this to that, and transfer those things. And the better able you are to deal with multiple, paradigms, the better you're able to respond when things don't happen the way you expect it to. And those are the students that are really, succeeding. I mean, because there is just a lot of unpredictability, and then there's natural turbulence that goes on. It's the companies who are capable of responding that end up succeeding, and not the companies who've got a super efficient method and then the things all change. So going back to your idea, I've made quite a bit of changes. I now put time in for classes for students to do problems on their own, because what I mean, in front of me, basically, because when I went to school, you did all that work at home, and so yes, the 30%, the top students in my class will do that work at home, but at least 70% who don't, so I literally make you sit there and you work on problems together, so we've changed. And so it's natural for us to, we ourselves, when we're dealing with our students, have to change.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important lesson. While this generation does not have a monopoly on short-term thinking, it's the fact is you have young professionals coming up in your organization, they might think differently, and there's good and bad to that. You can complain about it all you want, but in the end, if you want to be effective, you might need to adjust, especially if you're a coach and you're worried about them. So I think that's important for people to recognize, just from being a realist, as they go forward. So
Sure.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. This was great. I think listeners can take away all sorts of nuggets. We covered, generational changes. We've covered group dynamics. We've covered personal discipline. So we've covered a lot of territory in a short period of time. So, Zach, I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts, your experiences, and practices with us all.
Great. Thank you so much, Jamie. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Be well.
Thanks for listening to the People Solve Problems podcast. Let's keep the conversation going. Visit jflinch.com for more episodes and other content. And continue to join us on your podcast app, of course. We greatly appreciate your feedback through reviews and ratings. Consider expanding your understanding of problem solving with Jamie's book, People Solve Problems: The Power of Every Person, Every Day, Every Problem. Available on Amazon. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and solving problems.